China has theatre commands, 5 theatre commands. Russia has theatre commands. US has theatre commands. If you want your forces to have a cutting edge against your adversaries, then you must have theatre commands. There is a need for all 3 services to pull down their silos, to pull down their turfs, to pull down their fortresses and come together. You cannot have three services operating in different silos doing their own thing, in their own network, in their own kingdoms. You need to have a military theatre command if you are to go ahead. Prime Minister Narendra Modi understands this. General Chauhan understands this. There may be a variance of views, but then everybody knows that this is something which is coming ahead. These theatre commands have been approved in principle by Defence Minister Rajnath Singh. NSA Ajit Doval has also had a look at it. It's quite clear that there'll be 3 theatre commands. There'll be a West Theatre Command and there'll be an Eastern Theatre Command, and there'll be a Maritime Theatre Command. The government has made it very clear that when it comes to the armed forces, there is no bar. As long as you are able to project dominance.
Hello and a very warm welcome to all. You're watching Hindustan Times and my name is Aisha Varma. On this segment of Point Blank, we take a look at a remark made in recent history, one that garners even more significance after Operation Sindoor. How exactly is India's strength growing? What is the path from here? HT's Executive Editor, Mr. Shishir Gupta, joins us for more. Sir, namaskar. Sir, in February of 2020, General Bipin Rawat, India's first Chief of Defence Staff, had essentially announced the creation of integrated theatre commands. 6 years down the line, what exactly is the status of the creation of these theatre commands?
At the very outset, let me explain that it was in 2019, on August 15th, that Prime Minister Narendra Modi decided to announce the creation of the post of Chief of Defence Staff. Now, that was a recommendation of the Kargil Committee in 1999, right? But the Congress government subsequently could not take a decision whether to appoint a Chief of Defence Staff or not, because they thought that this would primarily give a lot of power to the defense forces, and they did not want to go back to the commander-in-chief kind of system that prevailed in the 1950s. Subsequently, General Bipin Rawat was appointed, and it was General Rawat who made this statement, and that's where we started to have what is called theatre commands. Now, the theatre commands are basically, it's all about synergy between the 3 services. It's all about jointmanship. It's all about having all the 3 services on the same page operationally when the red flag goes up. Now, as far as Prime Minister Narendra Modi goes, he is the one who believes in giving operational freedom to the armed forces. Now, if you look at whatever operation that was conducted by the Indian Armed Forces since it took over in 2014, you will see that it was left to the armed forces to take a decision because they were on ground, right? So, he's very clear. During Operation Sindoor, it was also very clear that he told them, do what you have to do, right? And rather than giving advice from the top without understanding what was happening on the ground. So, this is the broad context of why the theatre commands concept came all about. Now, currently what is happening is General Bipin Rawat was a person who was known to be aggressive. He was actually a war general who was known to be aggressive. And he wanted the theatre commands to be set up, during his tenure, but unfortunately he lost his life in a helicopter crash. Now, General Anil Chauhan, who also belongs to the same Gorkha regiment, he is somebody who believes in consensus. So, General Rawat, it was a top-down approach. Here it was a bottoms-up approach, but ultimately both believed in the military theatre commands. Now, what has happened is that the armed forces chief, that is not the current one, but the previous ones. We are talking about General Manoj Pandey. We are talking about Air Chief Marshal Vivek Ram Chaudhary. We are talking about Admiral Hari Kumar. And we are talking about General Chauhan. All four of them signed a document that they believe in what is called the theatre commands. And they all have given their explicit approval to the concept. Now the theatre commands are to be made. My understanding is when the Combined Commanders Conference took place on September 15-17 in Kolkata, Prime Minister Narendra Modi gave clear-cut directions that these commands should be made. So there is a very strong possibility, or let me put it, the note for the Cabinet Committee on Security will be made for the creation of the military theatre commands. These theatre commands have been approved in principle by Defence Minister Rajnath Singh. NSA Ajit Doval has also had a look at it. And the cabinet will be asked, or the CCS will be asked to take a final decision on this. Now, General Anil Chauhan will demit office in all probability by May 30th, 2026. Before that, the matter will go to the Cabinet Committee on Security, and India will go, or the Indian military will go for a huge transformational change. That is what the status is.
Sir, would you be able to explain why exactly there's a need for theatre commands?
See, Aisha, what's happening is that currently India is the number 4 economic power. You have US, you have China, you have Germany, and you have India, and India very soon is going to become the number 3 economic power. When you talk in terms of military power, India again is number 4 military power. You have US, you have Russia, you have China, you have India. So you are sitting on a high table and you look at who are ahead of you. Now, in US, the presidential form of government that it is, you have all those people, it's a system of spoils where all people who are politically tuned to you are appointed to take over the major positions, whether it is the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, so on and so forth. Now, you've seen over the years that once President Trump took over, he fired his own Chief of Defense Staff. And he fired the Chief of Naval Operations. If you look at Russia, President Vladimir Putin fired his Ukrainian commander, and other people were also dismissed for operational reasons, not for whims and fancies. If you look at the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, he's virtually fired half of his Central Military Commission, all powerful, including the vice chairman now. He's actually fired his defense minister, he's fired his foreign minister. So in all these 3 people, these people take a decision without worrying about what is going to be the political ramification, because that's the way it is. There are 2 communist powers, and then you have an executive president in President Trump. Now, for India to go up that ladder, it cannot be the world can actually look very benignly towards India and welcome it towards the number 1 position. No, it's not going to happen ever. So you have to be very clear in what your military response is going to be and how you will link up your military with your doctrines, with your military doctrines. And that is why there is a need for all 3 services to pull down their silos, to pull down their turfs, to pull down their fortresses and come together. It's a very tough decision of military theatre commands. The Americans had to move in what is called the Goldwater-Nichols Act in 1986 to form military theatre commands because there was problem within the politics of the US. Now, here again, there are different views on the entire thing, but the armed forces are in principle in agreement with the entire thing. And hence, if you want your forces to have a cutting edge against your adversaries, then you must have theater commands. China has theater commands, 5 theater commands. Russia has theater commands. US has theater commands. It's only logical that if you have to have a cogent, strong military response towards your adversary, you must have a theater command because you need all 3 sides to sit together. If you look during Operation Sindoor, the 3 chiefs and the Chief of Defence Staff, General Chauhan, were sitting in one room when the terrorist camps were taken out in response to that Pahalgam massacre. And the response was very sharp and very precise because the 3 services were together. That is why you need a military theater command. You cannot have three services operating in different silos doing their own thing, in their own network, in their own kingdoms. You need to have a military theater command if you are to go ahead. Prime Minister Narendra Modi understands this. General Chauhan understands this. There may be a variance of views, but then everybody knows that this is something which is coming ahead.
So you just mentioned a variance of views. So is there synergy, is there harmony between the 3 services when it comes to the creation of theater commands, or are there still differences that exist?
See, the 3 service chiefs have already put it in writing that they are in sync with the military theater commands. Now, the only thing is, how many military theater commands do you want to have? What is going to be the military doctrine that will govern the military theater commands? So there have been variance of views. There has been, there would be a theater command in the West, which will be purely focused on Pakistan. A theater command in the East or Central, which will be purely focused on China. And then a Northern command separately, because Northern command faces Pakistan towards one side in the West, and towards the East it faces China, and the borders are still disputed. Now, the military theater commands, whether it involves the Andaman Nicobar command, that is also one of the things. Now, this has been going on, but it's fundamentally clear that you are going to have military theater commands. There are views that, why should we divide the assets, the Air Force assets, the Navy assets? Now, there are various views, but when they all come to the table, and I am told recently, the CDS held a meeting with all the service chiefs, right? That is last month. And they have all been discussing that. Now, it's quite clear that there'll be 3 theater commands. There'll be a West theater command and there'll be an Eastern theater command, and there'll be a Maritime theater command, because India has 7,000 kilometers of coastline, which is very vulnerable. It has 1,062 islands that it needs to defend. And plus, the doctrinal requirement is also quite complete in the sense that in case there was any emergency in the neighborhood, be it Maldives, be it Sri Lanka, be it Myanmar, be it Bangladesh, be it Nepal, be it all these places, or even, places like Mauritius, Seychelles, India will need to have a cogent response. And in that, all 3 services will be required. So that is why people discuss a lot of things, but ultimately the theater commands, it's as clear as the day that the time is now for the theater commands to be established. And they should be very soon, because that is the requirement as far as the way the world is positioned today. It's very unstable all over the place. So you need to have one precise response.
So then, coming to the crux of it, how exactly is having theater commands going to help our forces? How is it going to be able to boost our capacity, our efficiency, our capability?
See, what has happened is that over the years, if you look at it, do you know that the Air Force operated on its own communication channels? The Army operated on its own communication channels. The Navy operated on its own communication channels. Now, in case there was an event where, in case there was an incident, in case there was an accident where it involved the Army to get the Air Force involved, it would go down to the military headquarters. Tell them, the military headquarters would then go down to the formation command and then take a decision. So that time lag would be huge. The response would be delayed. Now what has happened is, General Chauhan has ensured that all three are using the same communication channels. So you are immediately, one commander, formation commander of the Air Force is directly in touch with the formation commander of the Army, is directly in touch with the naval commander. So the decision is that more faster, the implementation is that more faster, the response is that more sharper. That is what it is. Then you needed to have the three services integrating its intelligence. One was collecting intelligence for its own, the other was collecting it on its own, the third was doing it on its own. Now what has happened is all three have come on the same page. You have a defense intelligence agency which looks at a big broader picture, which looks at intelligence, satellite imagery, which looks at what is happening in the neighborhood, and so that a clear-cut decision is made by the chairman, chief of staff committee, whose permanent chairman is the CDS. That's part two. Then you have to look at how your response is going to come. Cyber security, that's one major thing that is there. In the current world, you have the adversary is going to use weapons which are going to downgrade your own systems. Your systems will not function. So how will you ensure that there is one common platform where all the three services are cyber secure? So that has also been achieved. As far as the ground is concerned, you need to have the three services together on the same page. And that is what you saw during Operation Sindoor. That is the first time when the three service chiefs were sitting in the same place with the CDS, with instructions coming from the top. Right? So that is why it is critical to have military theatre commands. I mean, you can have various views on it that can always be refined, that can always be honed up and made more efficient. But the fact remains is, it is the requirement of the day. You need a singular principal military advisor, which is the CDS, under whom the theatre commands should function. You cannot have the time, the colonial mindset has to go out, the time where the Indian Army or the Indian Armed Forces were the legacy of the British Raj. That time is gone. You have to create your own systems, you have to create your own tactics, you have to create your own doctrines to ensure that this happens. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is very clear. Now it is the time for the CDS to deliver.
So beyond this, our defense budget has also increased. Is it because of the creation of these theatre commands?
See, our defense budget has been increased significantly post Operation Sindoor. The fact is that the Defense Ministry had projected a requirement of 20% in capital expenditure. The government has given 22%. Out of which the subset was modernization budget. That has been increased to 24%. Now, there are two things in this. This also will contribute to creating the military infrastructure needed for the military theatre commands, which means that you acquire more assets so that you are being able to divide it within the three theatre commands. And what is important is that the government has made it very clear that when it comes to the armed forces, there is no bar. As long as you are able to project dominance, as long as you are able to project power all over, at least in Asia, the government is very clear that it is willing to give whatever is required to acquire latest platforms. That is, if India were to is now planning to acquire 114 Rafale fighters, India is looking to acquire standoff missiles. India is looking to acquire high altitude, long endurance drones, medium altitude, long endurance drones, armed drones. So there's a new weapon systems that are going to are going to come into the Indian Armed Forces. And for that, you have to pay. And all this will be made in India. So the stage is set for military theatre commands. And they'll be empowered.
Sir, thank you so much for joining us, bringing us more insight into something that is going to prove to be very important when it comes to India's defense position and growing our own strength overall. But with that, it's a wrap. Do stay tuned to Hindustan Times and join us next week for another segment of Point Blank.